Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I'm your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 130 coming at you live from the TCO Performance Center on Thursday, November 20th. Few days before the Packers game in Green Bay. Our guest is Matt Schneidman, who covers the team for The Athletic. A colleague of mine, have spent a lot of time talking to him about his team over the years. He does a great job and has for a long time over there. So really enjoyable conversation talking about the Packers defense, got to Jordan Love, the dynamics of losing Tucker Kraft, and what this matchup could look like. Some hardcore intel on that coming at you later in this show. If you're new here and watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button below. There's also a little red box thing in the corner. You just hover over that, click that. It costs you nothing. It benefits us, and we really appreciate that. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, you can also follow and rate and review, hit the little stars thing. That helps us out as well. We've enjoyed growing this thing now for a year plus. Hope you guys have enjoyed the ride. The show is presented by First Resource Bank. If you don't know about it, it's a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area. They've got branches all over the place, and it's run by really good people. Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, Charlie Anderson. These guys really care about the community. They're also Vikings fans. Their banking platform is from what I've heard, it's one of the fastest growing banks in this area, and I understand why. Really good people who want to do it the right way. So please go check out First Resource Bank. And then we're sponsored by Unreal, the locally owned clothing brand. They've got limited edition NFL drops, and I'm wearing it every day. And it's kind of embarrassing, but I can handle it. So, it's not embarrassing because the clothes are that good, and I appreciate them. So that's Unreal. Before we get into the conversation with Matt, I did want to do a little foray further into J.J. McCarthy and the mechanics conversation because, A, Kevin O'Connell's talked further about it this week. B, J.J. McCarthy was asked a lot about it on Wednesday. And C, I've done a lot of conversations over the course of this week with people in the industry on this subject. And what I mean by that, I guess vaguely, throwing coaches, people in executive positions across the league, just as much intel gathering as I feel like I can do, should do on this subject, which, I feel like at this point, given the extent of how much we've talked about quarterback mechanics and pocket movement and footwork and eyes and posture, I'm getting close to hopping out there and coaching guys for 6'1", quarterbacks. Just kidding, I'm not. But you really feel like you could teach a course in it at this rate. So on Wednesday, you guys who are on social media probably know that J.J. McCarthy spoke and said a couple of things. One of the first comments he made, he was asked how close he feels like he is. He said, I feel like for me, I kind of make the analogy of a cork about to come off the bottle. It's understanding that it's 1 to 3 little things that I need to change about my game that is going to make a huge difference in the outcome of every single drive. When he was asked what those 1 to 3 things are, he mentioned posture, he mentioned processing after the snap, and kind of pulling the trigger on things that he's seeing. Those were a couple of things. Then he was also asked how hard it is, how different what he's learning from a quarterback standpoint is. And he said, quote, coming in here, I was taught how to play quarterback a very different way. He was asked how hard it is to do some rewiring. He said, it's really hard. You're rewiring neurological pathways, and that's not something that happens overnight. There was obviously there will be a lot made about him saying it's rewiring neurological pathways. And I understand why. That's real jargon heavy. But the truth of the matter is, that's what, when you are, let's say you guys play golf, okay, and you're trying to make a swing change, it's hard not to fall back into what you've done because you're trying to rewire movement patterns. That's what it is. I'm not sure if we would all describe it that way, but or use that phrasing, but there's no question that's what it is. Pitchers who are making mechanical changes on the mound, like that's, similar things. Basketball players who are changing their shot. A lot of what they're doing is rewiring kind of the muscle memory, to use that phrase, of what it is. So, like, there's no question that when you are changing something about how your body moves, specific to sport, like that is what it is, and new movement takes time. Now, I'll say a couple things first and foremost. Like, most quarterbacks, who arrive from college into the NFL, whether they've played in air raid, shotguns, heavy systems like a Patrick Mahomes, or whether they've played in under center, drop back, play action systems, kind of like J.J. McCarthy did, like, there is a learning curve in entering the NFL. And a lot of that is very specific. Like, for J.J. McCarthy and for a lot of quarterbacks, they've played with their right foot up in college, and they've got to, change to where their left foot is now up. And that obviously affects everything else. Your first step, which in the industry, they would call that a punch step. Like, that is something. If you go back and you look at J.J. McCarthy's mechanics in 2023 at Michigan, when he takes his first drop, it's kind of a balanced both feet, in his first step, whereas now it's like a one-step punch with his left foot. It's a very subtle thing that is really hard to identify, and trust me, I know that from having tried to identify it over the last few days. But it's something that matters. And then you're tweaking some of that stuff. Now you're learning the drops in the NFL, which can be very different from the drops you've taken in college. And the timing of the drops, and the repping that takes time for sure. And then, I mean, there are a lot of other tweaks that pretty much, I mean, like, almost every quarterback leaving college entering the NFL has to make, to fit this style of game. That's just it is part of it. And some guys obviously acclimate quicker than others. I'd say, like, for J.J. McCarthy, a lot of this stuff this year is not that new. I mean, in the sense that it was a real big focus for him when he arrived from Michigan the spring of 2024, the summer of 2024, into camp in 2024. Like, that was a lot of the process, the conversation, the focus. And then obviously the injury happens with the torn meniscus. And J.J. McCarthy made reference to this Wednesday, but you do wonder how much those affected the continual progress that he might have been on coming out of that first preseason game against the Raiders. Now, I say that, and I went back and watched the preseason Raiders game to see how much of what we're seeing now existed there. And what I would tell you is there's definitely, in that game specifically, and again, it's a preseason game. You don't have elite pass rushers coming at you, so it's hard to play apples to apples with this. But there was definitely, with JJ at the time, a more sense of calm with his movements. Like, that just shows up immediately when you go watch that tape. I'd also say the overstriding of his throwing motion, which, I mean, we're digging deep here, but if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see overstriding means instead of like having your footwork kind of aligned with your base, it's like getting his front foot way outside his base, which then gets him too far over his front foot. Like, that stuff, it's still in some ways existed in that preseason game tape. It's probably not as drastic as what we've seen recently. But so that's what I'd say. I will, in that game, one of the things that Kevin O'Connell has also talked about is just JJ's pocket movements. And some guys who really succeed, like at this level, and you can see it even in Jordan Love's tape, like pressure comes at him and it's this subtle move and then stick and calm and make your decision from there. Not pressure comes at you And, it's a wild, aggressive, violent movements up or out of the pocket. And like, that's one area where you wonder if it's just going to take a lot of time to establish that feel. It's also an area where you wonder, like, if the calm, if the lack of calm in the NFL game, like if you can get to that place, if you don't have that sense of feel already. I mean, the other aspect that I think is less tweakable or adaptable or adjustable than the mechanics is the lack of touch. I mean, that's something that was a conversation for JJ coming out of college, and it's something that showed up. Like even in the most recent game against the Bears, there were multiple throws where you just want to put more air onto the football. The TJ Hawkinson screen leak out to the left sideline, that ball needs more air. The Aaron Jones mesh railroad kind of throw to the left side of the end zone, that you'd really like to see more air on that ball. And like that's one where when you talk to people in the industry, adding more touch, do people think you can? Yes, but there's also kind of a view that some of that might just be tied to like a guy's feel, arm talent, kind of like how with baseball for a long time, the ability to throw a changeup was so much feel. And like you talk to pitching coaches and they're like, some guys really have that and some guys don't. Now, baseball has gotten to a place where they've been able to develop different types of changeups, and that's allowed it to happen. But like it does sound like when you talk about this subject with a lot of people, like there's like a fingertips, just kind of innate aspect to that, which is will be something to watch, obviously, over time. I mean, I do think it's important to note, like before the draft, J.J. McCarthy did not work with Greg Holcomb, who's longtime throwing coach. He did a lot of his draft prep with a guy, John Beck, former NFL quarterback, who works for a company called 3D QB, and they work with a ton of guys. And that was the guy that he did his pre-draft prep with. J.J. McCarthy has not. I've had many conversations where it's like, yeah, his mechanics are not efficient. Like he is not rotating his lower half and kind of, and dissociating his lower body and upper body the way that you see a lot of guys nowadays within the NFL. And I mean, a question would be like, I mean, how much of that is tied to maybe the biomechanics of him playing hockey? How much of that is he just hasn't been trained that way? And then if you were to spend an entire offseason kind of troubleshooting and trying to get to that place, like how does everybody feel about it? Does the team okay feel like you wade into some real, treacherous waters with a lot of that stuff? Now, I would say this, like all of this is to say, like writing him off at this point would be just absolutely foolish. You just can't. 5 games in, 22 years old, as athletic as he is, with him responding to what Sunday was with that final drive, like it would just be absurd to do that. What seems pretty evident by the way Kevin O'Connell's talked about it this week is they'd really like to see some improvements here in the short term and just more consistency. And that's what obviously we will be watching. And then for me, the way I've kind of viewed it is once you get to the offseason, depending how these next 7 games go, then the conversations are really relevant about like, what are the next steps here? Is it, really need to have a biomechanical analysis and be real aggressive with trying to become more efficient in your movements? Is it just further repping the footwork? And then obviously, what does that mean with decision-making elsewhere? But to go down that place right now is just it's not something that needs to be done. There's 7 games left in this season. There's a lot remaining. Yes, the Vikings might have a 3% chance to make the playoffs, but every one of these games is a phenomenal data point to assessing like where JJ is, where he's going, how much growth we're seeing, and then what needs to happen moving forward. And so, like that's what I'd say. The fact that it's been as hard as it's been to this point to get him to a place at which the mechanics are seamless, like that is telling, and that is something that is notable. But I personally, and I think part of this is just what my role asks of me, but also part of me just feel like this is the most rational thought is I have to see the data points and the day-to-day of these next 7 weeks. And we all know, you guys listening to this definitely know that things can change drastically one week or another in terms of the narrative, in terms of how people feel. What I don't expect to change drastically in 7 weeks is the efficiency of his mechanics. That is very much an off-season kind of conversation. So a lot to kind of sort through from that, but there's just it's a pretty fascinating situation, conversation. We talked a lot about it. We've written a lot about it. We're not going to stop because when you draft a quarterback at number 10 and have invested as much as they've had in him, it is the A topic. It is of the utmost importance, and I'm not going to stop doing my best to get at kind of the most nitty-gritty aspects of it to bring it to you guys. So, that'll wrap the JJ McCarthy portion of the proceedings. Let's not waste any more of your time and get right into our conversation with Matt Schneidman about this Vikings-Packers game. All right, Matt, welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. Glad to have you here. Wanted to talk about this border war. I'll start with this. What is your view from across the border of the Vikings and JJ McCarthy in the situation here? I just wonder from the outside, what would the perspective be?
Yeah, well, I don't watch the Vikings every week. I read your story off of last week's game just to prep for my opponent preview section of the podcast I do with John Kuhn, the Tundra, shameless plug, go subscribe. And it seems to me that this guy can't hit the broadside of a barn. I exaggerate, obviously, but it was kind of funny listening to Matt LaFleur talk about J.J. McCarthy this week. Yesterday, as we record this on Thursday, Matt LaFleur was asked about J.J. McCarthy on Wednesday. And obviously, coach speak, he's going to praise him. And at the end of his answer, he said, he's going to figure it out eventually, basically meaning he stinks right now. But we just hope he doesn't figure it out against us. So look, I understand he was drafted in the first round for a reason, but it wasn't really like your typical Jordan Love learning under Aaron Rodgers year, just because he was hurt. And
right.
This Packers defense with Micah Parsons and Rashawn Gary and maybe Lucas Van Ness coming back for the first time in a month and a half up front could cause some trouble for that Vikings O-line and J.J. McCarthy if, like what you're writing, comes to fruition on Sunday and he gets kind of skittish in kind of those dirty pockets.
Yes, we'll start with the deep. I mean, I really want to talk Love, and we'll save that for the end because he's such a fascinating player to me to watch. But watching on film the Packers defense, I'm not sure I thought, expected, or, this secondary to me was more impressive than I think I entered watching the film expecting. Is that, am I right to think the group of Carrington Valentine, Keyshawn Nixon, Evan Williams, Xavier McKinney, like that group is really, has really held their own? Am I right to think that with what you've seen this year?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that question while I look up a stat on True Media because I think the Packers are first in the NFL in lowest percentage of explosive plays allowed, if I'm not mistaken. They were number one last week, so I'll look that up when you're asking your next question. I'm sure the Vikings have guys like this, but the fan-base perception of Keyshawn Nixon, I think, probably has the biggest discrepancy of any player on the roster when you're talking about reality, who he is as a player. He's not the brand name number one corner. And sure, he's had his rough spots this year. He didn't play well against the Steelers in the first half, had a couple penalties. Aaron Rodgers was picking on him. last week against the New York Giants, he got burnt by Isaiah Hodgins. He didn't have a great game. He's one of the league leaders in defensive penalties. He's also one of the league leaders in PBUs. And he's not the worst number one corner. And then Carrington Valentine, like you said, he's had to play against Justin Jefferson before because a couple years ago when the Packers were trying to, pretty much lock up that playoff spot or stay alive at least in that, I think it was a Sunday night game in Minnesota, that was the game Jair Alexander was suspended for the coin toss incident. And Carrington Valentine, I thought, played well that game. And he's been playing really well these last couple games since taking over for Nate Hobbs. Xavier McKinney had 8 interceptions last year. People just aren't throwing at him. So people look at his stat line and say, this guy is not having
he's fallen off
season. It's a sign of respect that they're not throwing at him. And look, this defense has been shaky against the run in recent weeks, but that's pretty much about the only area you can really critique them in because they rank top 10 in pretty much all the major categories, and Micah Parsons is getting double-teamed, I believe. Last time I checked recently, it was the highest rate in the league according to NFL research. Double-teamed at the highest rate in the league by far, which is opening up stuff for other guys. And then, like I said, if you get Lucas Van Ness back for the first time since week 6, that adds another guy who is playing well to this Jeff Hafley defense.
Yeah, 3rd and long. It was interesting looking up some of the Packers' numbers. 3rd and long, offensively, they're the best in the NFL at converting 3rd and long. Defensively, the Packers are one of the best in the NFL at preventing other teams from converting 3rd and long. And so that does bring me, started with secondary, it brings me to the run game. Like, it does feel like
I found the stat.
Yeah.
The Packers are second in the NFL behind the Denver Broncos in fewest percentage of defensive plays allowing an explosive gain.
Yeah, that will work. To shift a little bit, in talking about 3rd and long, which is the last place you want to be probably against this defense, especially with a quarterback who has been as inaccurate as J.J. McCarthy has been, the run game feels paramount. And it does seem like you can run against this group. The question I'd have to you is, why have they been so susceptible, you think, against the run? Because, part of me watching the Giants game back, it's like Tyrone Tracy looked great in the game. But, for Tyrone Tracy to look that good is probably a reflection of a Packers run defense that needs to be better, I would imagine.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because I think they still rank top 10 in rushing yards allowed per game. That's just how good they were through the first, 8 weeks of the season. It's really the first half of the Steelers game in week 8 when Jaylen Warren got them. And then week 9, Rico Dowdle was amazing against them. Against the Eagles in week 10, they stifled Saquon Barkley. They were awesome against him. And then last week, Tyrone Tracy, got his a little bit. So it's not really these egregious missed tackles. It's a combination of not being in the right gap at the line of scrimmage. And then just from eye test, it seems that whenever guys run into, a scrum, they're pushing the pile forward for an extra 2 or 3 yards, or they're falling forward for an extra 2 or 3 yards. The Giants only averaged on 38 carries. They ran the ball 38 times, averaged 3.7 yards per carry. So it's one of those games where you look at the box score, and it's different than the eye test. Eye test was, okay, it's just body blow after body blow. But you look at the box score, and it's 3.7. That's not bad. But it was one of those where it's 3.7 after 3.7 after 3.7 after 3.7. And that's why I say body blow after body blow, because it wasn't like 0, 1, 0, 20. And that would almost look better. So I still think on the whole, they've been really good defending the run. And, they were horrible defending the run 2019 to 2023 with Mike Pettin and Joe Barry as DC. And they've been a top 10 run defense since Jeff Hafley got here.
Yeah, Mike Pettin, for the Vikings fans listening to this podcast, he is a coach on the staff here. But yeah, I it was interesting. Like the linebackers, Quay Walker, Isaiah McDuffie, those guys feel like, downhill players and worse maybe in space. Edgerrin Cooper, I love that guy. And every time we do a podcast, which is twice a year or whatever, Kingsley Enagbare just pops for me. And I'm like, I don't know what this deal is with this guy when I watch him on film. And maybe I don't know what I'm looking at, which is likely. But
you do.
For some reason, every time I see him, I'm like, there's something with this guy opposite Micah Parsons who I like. So I guess I'm asking if I'm crazy when I say that.
You want to know why you're not? Because the guy who you should be realizing opposite Micah Parsons is Rashawn Gary, the guy that's paid $24 million a year, who's the 13th highest paid edge rusher in the NFL. But yesterday, it's funny you say that because against the Giants, Rashawn Gary only played 39 out of 72 snaps. And Matt LaFleur was asked why yesterday. And he said, well, it's a combination of a couple things. It's a combination of Rashawn Gary's never been a high snap count guy, which is not really what you want to hear from your head coach about a guy you're paying $24 million a year. He said it was kind of a product of the game. And then he also said Kingsley Enagbare is earning more snaps, and that's why he's playing more. So congrats. You are seeing the same thing that Matt LaFleur is seeing on tape.
Yeah, similar football minds, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
All right, to switch over the offense a little bit, Jordan Love is such a, I've got buddies here and friends, and Jordan Love creates such drastic opinions. It feels like. Yeah. How do you kind of put in perspective how you feel like he's played? Because if you, just watch the film of the Giants game. I mean, if you do that and then you look at the advanced numbers, big time throw rate. Lack of turnover-worthy play rate. Like, the guy is unbelievably impressive. He has subtle movements in the pocket. He's got the arm talent. He's accurate in their drops. Like, I have a hard time watching him where I'm not like, why? This guy is probably one of the top 7 guys in the league at the position. That's my opinion, and people here listening are probably rolling their eyes. But how do you put in perspective what you feel like you've seen from this guy?
Yeah, I don't think you're far off, and it's funny because I got asked a question in my mailbag this week just about the perception of Jordan Love versus the reality. And I was listening to Orlovsky recently, and I think he hit the nail on the head when he said there's this narrative around Jordan Love that he's this reckless thrower of the football who's turnover prone. That's not really the case. Like, he was the first half of his first year starting, and then he was the first half of last year. But he has, 3 interceptions this year maybe? I don't have the numbers in front of me. He's not
that's right.
Gaudy touchdown numbers, but the accuracy on some of these high-level throws, whether it's to Savion Williams last week or Christian Watson on the slot fade or Christian Watson deep down the right sideline on 3rd and 2 last week for an incomplete pass, or on the move to his right to Christian Watson against the Steelers across his body. Like, there are not many quarterbacks in the league, maybe a handful, who can make the kind of throws on and off platform that Jordan Love can. Now, is he the best quarterback in the league? No, but I would say he's firmly top 10 when he's healthy. And the fact that he has had some downswings this year, I would say, sure, he hasn't been perfect, but the Packers' biggest weakness, I think, unquestionably, is their offensive line. This is not the Green Bay Packers offensive line of decades past with Bakhtiari and Lindsley and all these guys who wouldn't let Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love get touched. This offensive line is not great, especially run blocking, but pass blocking isn't, the best either. So some of what you're seeing from Jordan Love is a result of all the pressure that's on him. And then even after last Sunday's game against the Giants, Matt LaFleur said, I thought it was such a gritty performance in some of the plays he made because it seemed like he was under constant duress. And then Jordan Love missed 7 plays last week with the left shoulder injury. He's fine now, but it was just kind of a performance that's emblematic of the quarterback he's become, kind of fighting through a little bit of adversity around him to really make plays and will this team to a win in spite of some other things.
And there's Dexter Lawrence coming scotch-free through the A-gap, and he'll just make this subtle movement to avoid the sack. And it's not like what Vikings fans saw last week where Caleb Williams is spinning out it's the Matrix, but it's these little subtle kind of evades that I don't know. It's impressive to me. You talked about the offensive line. By my read, it feels like the right tackle, Zach Tom, is really good. And then everywhere else, it's kind of like, Jordan Morgan, the right guard. First-round pick, I'm not totally sure. Center, Sean Ryan, don't really know much about this guy. Left guard, Aaron Banks, run blocker, not really sure in pass protection. They paid him a lot of money. Left tackle, Rasheed Walker, can kind of get beat quick inside with speed. it really doesn't feel to the point you made. Like it doesn't feel like that group can be trusted at a premium level, and that obviously impacts the run game, which they've leaned on to be so efficient, and those numbers have obviously regressed from last year specifically.
Yeah, I honestly think at this point, and this can obviously change, the offensive line is what could hold this team back from really making a run in the playoffs. And you're absolutely right. Zach Tom's the most sure thing. He's the third highest paid right tackle in football, a Pro Bowl caliber player. But he's, I don't even know if he's 100% now. He left Sunday's game for a play. I think he tore his oblique earlier this season, missed some time. He's been banged up and not 100%, but he is clearly their best offensive lineman when healthy. Jordan Morgan's a left tackle. He was a college left tackle. That's his best position. He's going to be starting for these guys at left tackle next year.
Interesting.
But they got to get him in the starting lineup, and right guard is where they've kind of put him. Sean Ryan's their backup center because Elton Jenkins is out for the season with an ankle injury, and they moved him to center. He was a two-time Pro Bowler at left guard. Then they moved him to center this offseason. And Brian Gutekunst said he thought Jenkins could be an all-pro center. That hasn't really been the case. Aaron Banks, 4 years, $77 million in free agency from the 49ers. He hasn't come close to living up to it. Been playing better recently.
Like the Will Fries here. Similar, right. Very similar.
And Rasheed Walker is he's serviceable. He's serviceable left tackle, but there's no chance they re-sign him in free agency this coming offseason. So if they're going to make a run, it's going to be because Jordan Love creates some magic. It's not going to be because this offensive line is a rock wall.
Yeah, and I mean, the last thing, I'll let you get out of here. We'll talk receivers for a second. But I do want to say, the run design, I love it, of the Packers. Like, every time I watch them on film, they're doing stuff that is creative, that you can tell they spend time on it. Like, there was a play in the Giants game where it's this, like, counter tornado spin out reverse to the outside. Might have been Bo Melton for like 17 or something. Yeah. It was somebody for 17. So you can tell, and this is like a Vikings adjacent conversation, that how much time and energy the Packers spend in the run game. And I think there are times with the Vikings where you can tell how little time and energy they spend with some of those designer curated plays. You can end it however you want to. Feels like the receiver drops. I mean, it's just kind of what's going to happen with this group. And then if they don't have Josh Jacobs, like, I don't know how much I worry about that. I really feel like Emmanuel Wilson, the other guy, Chris Brooks, have been pretty fine behind him. So however you want to end it on the offense, and I'll let you take it.
No, I was just going to say I could stay here for a while, but LaFleur talks in 20 minutes for anyone watching. That's why I'm rushing out of here. I think Emmanuel Wilson, he's obviously not Josh Jacobs, but he's a really fluid runner. And if you watch him run, it just looks like a natural running motion, which is impressive that a guy who went undrafted 2 years ago out of a Division II college has become a guy who can come in and you say, oh, there isn't that much of a drop-off. So you'll probably see him on Sunday, although we'll see here in about an hour or so whether Jacobs is on the field. It's just a knee contusion. They just have to wait for the swelling to go down. But I know there are a lot of fantasy football players watching this situation intently. With the receivers, the drops have really only been an issue the last two games. Last year, they were an issue throughout, and it was bad. They were one of the worst teams catching the football last year. This year was really last game and the game before, and it's really just been recently. But, getting a guy like Christian Watson back who's pretty sure-handed really helps because Romeo Doubs, who at times looks like the most sure-handed guy on the team, has 3 drops and 2 egregious ones last week. So it just amplifies, and this is how I'll end it, how important and how significant the loss of Tucker Kraft is. He was arguably the best tight end in the league at the time he tore his ACL in Week 9. After the catch, he's an absolute monster. And when the Packers are facing a lot of these too high safety defenses, they have to rely on getting yards after the catch to matriculate the ball down the field because the explosives aren't there. And they just don't have that yak guy on the team. I mean, Jaden Reed, but he's still hurt. He'll be coming back soon. But without Tucker Kraft, they really have to get creative with how to get the ball down the field if they're going to be checking it down repeatedly. And it's tough for an aggressive guy like Jordan Love to do and stay patient. So that's been kind of the question with this Packers offense, who hasn't run the ball against too high as well as you need to get teams out of that defense.
Yeah.
So in the passing game, how do you generate that movement down the field? That's kind of what's held them back for the better part of the last month.
That's very well said. Thanks for hopping on. Enjoy LaFleur. I'll see you in the press box with hopefully the omelet station, the cheese curds, and everything else. Okay. Okay, good. Yeah. I mean, look, you got to drive to Appleton. You better have the omelet station. See you this weekend, Matt. Thanks, man.
Thanks,
and that'll do it for episode 130 of the Alec Lewis Show. Appreciate you guys being here. Always look forward to these trips to Green Bay. Never take it for granted. Did an internship in Milwaukee in college where I got to cover some Packers training camp stuff, or not training camp, but OTAs and just the aura of that place. For as much as you guys probably despise that team, it's a gratitude to get to go there and cover games at that place. So never take it for granted. But thank you guys for being here. Appreciate First Resource Bank, our presenting sponsor, who has branches all across the Minneapolis area and a phenomenal online banking platform, which I use often. Appreciate Unreal for their support, locally owned clothing brand that has limited edition Vikings drops and hoodies that are coveted by my friends, by a lot of people that I know. So please go check out Unreal. And if you made it this far, we appreciate it. Stories galore from me over at theathletic.com, where I do my day job covering this team. And with that, we will see you guys next week for a lot more analysis, takeaways, thoughts, conversations, rambles. It's all here on the Alec Lewis Show. Thank you guys for being here. Enjoy the rest of your week. And enjoy the weekend. Get as much, establish as much joy from getting to watch football as you possibly can, because at some point it'll be the off season and we'll be missing it. Thank you guys for being here. Talk to you very, very soon.